Psalm 68:6 says, God sets the lonely in families. When you read this whole psalm, you'll find that it's really a psalm celebrating God's power and might. Yet tucked into the middle is this amazing description of God's gentleness, His loving character. It says, sing to God. He's the father to the fatherless, a defender of widows. And God sets the lonely in families. When we were talking about this as a staff this week, we all recognized that loneliness might be one of those feelings that's hard for us to identify with. If we're surrounded by a spouse and friend or around people constantly, we might not ever really feel lonely. In fact, we live in a world that promises connection all the time. I mean, think about how many times we're on our phones or on the computer, and those that use social media, they can constantly feel connected to other people or feel like other people are connected to them. But how often do we slow down enough to really understand that we are known and loved? I think that loneliness is this prevailing sense that we might not be known and we might not be loved. But too often we cover it with the busyness of our lives, and we never slow down long enough to really ask ourselves if we feel known and if we feel really loved as God intended us to be loved. God sets the lonely in families. That was His intent from the beginning. In the garden, He saw Adam and saw that it was not good for him to be alone. And so He created Eve to be with him. This act of God is much more than talking about marriage or a spouse. It reveals that God's heart is that we would be known and loved. My challenge for you this week is to think about whether there's something in your life that you have put in your life in order to keep you from ever feeling that you're alone. Is there some habit that you need to break to actually rest with the question, am I really known? And am I really loved? And if God sets the lonely in families, what might you do this week to be a part of God's family? What might you do to put yourself in relationship with one other person or a small group of people so that you can be truly known and to be truly loved? And perhaps the other side of that question is to ask yourself, what might I be? How might I be a family to someone else? How might I look out for someone that might need a family, and how might I be their family? How might we be a family to those who are lonely? My prayer this week is that we would live out as a church this verse, that God sets the lonely in families.